Hello, and welcome to another episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. I want to do a massive shout out to anyone and everyone who has sent through an email through to the Everyday Joy inbox. It is such a delight to hear individuals reach out and share their stories, share how God has been using this podcast to bring about joy and meaning, and maybe even a little bit of a challenge as well. Now, if you want to send through a personal email, this comes straight through to the Everyday Joy podcast team. The inbox is in the description below. And if you've got some suggestions and some feedback as well, that's the place to do it. So if you want to find the link, the email address is below in the description, or if you've got a good memory, it's everydayjoy@positivemedia.com.au. Right now though, let's get into today's episode.
Forget yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand. That's from Philippians 2 verse 4 in the Message version.
I've got the incredible Ash here. Hello, Ash.
Hey Joy, we're back.
Do you have like a favorite end of year Christmas movie that's like, it's not, it doesn't feel like summer, it doesn't feel like Christmas time unless you've watched this movie?
I have two.
Okay.
Number one is Love Actually.
Oh.
I love that movie. Watch it on the 1st of December on my own if necessary. Two, I love Christmas with the Cranks.
That's
and
fun. Yep.
I just could watch it over and over again. I love it so much.
I get the Twilight itch.
The Twilight. I do love Twilight. I don't know if that's unchristian of me, but I love it.
I know it's bad. I know the filming wasn't great. I know
it's just the soundtrack,
everything,
the CGI.
Everything is awful. But yet, every year,
I
around
get
the
that.
November time, for some reason, I think it's because I watch it every year around November, and then I kind of get like the Twilight itch.
I get that.
Literally this time last year, I'm like, Ari, now that I've watched all the Star Wars films, all the ones he classes as like worth watching,
yes,
let me introduce you to Edward Cullen.
It's so good. It's Christmas, but it's not Christmas.
It's not. I mean, yeah, it's true.
There are pine trees.
That's as close.
Lots of pine trees. And snow.
You should ask this question on the Facebook page, because here's the thing. I feel like when it comes to watching Christmas movies, you kind of need to get yourself sorted before the month of December starts.
Yes.
Because you will not have, you'll be like, if you're like me, you'll spend 2 hours trying to find the right movie to watch. But if you've got a Christmas list, good to go.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah.
How did we get here?
Very, very wildly.
Okay, let's jump back to the Bible. Philippians 2:4, don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. Forget yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand. What's your first impression of this one?
I think that actually the second part gets to me the most, where it says, forget yourself long enough to lend a helping hand. I think when I kind of look at it, I don't tend to myself struggle with maybe necessarily that getting your own advantage. Like I feel like I really try hard to not live in that space. But I think sometimes, even though I'm maybe not living always to get my own advantage, I live unintentionally. And I have said this to so many people, that life is about living intentionally. So you can mean like so well, but do nothing.
Yeah.
And people may receive that poorly, or you might do nothing, not out of bad intentions, but you miss someone's had a baby and you just miss that opportunity to go help them out.
Sure.
And I've been there, and you reflect on it and you go, oh man, I should have done something there. Like I just should have gone and made a meal, or I should have just gone and done this. I think my biggest challenge is, Ash, can you jump out of your sphere for like 10 minutes and really just think about how you can help someone else out in this season? That is my biggest challenge. And I think, like we talked about in one of the other episodes, we get so busy, we get hurried and scurried, and we sometimes don't take the time to, not even in a self-indulgent way, but we get so caught up in the busyness that we don't have the time to pull back and reflect on how we can lend a hand to other people.
That's such a good point there, because there's really two parts to this verse. The first part is getting your own advantage and not being obsessed with it. And part 2 is forgetting yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand. And I think for you listening, if that's the part of the verse you struggle with, it's, you don't really have issues with people doing better than you. You want to help people. You don't have issues around that. Maybe for you, it's just getting out of your head long enough to see the need around you.
Yeah.
And I love the application there, just for 10 minutes. Like, can you set a timer on your phone and just write down all the names of people and then write down what their needs might be around this time? Like, that could be a really great way to apply this verse. I think for me, my first impression probably is around the first part of the verse.
Amazing.
So it says, don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. And I think it speaks to the rat race part of my university experience. I'll tell you the story a bit later, but it's got to do with a rat dissection lab and competitive students who wanted to get into med.
Oh.
That's a teaser. We'll get into it later.
That was good.
Thank you.
Have you done this before?
Just a little.
So true. So true.
So what does this verse tell you about who God is or what matters to him?
I think that it shows that he cares about how we treat other people. And he cares a lot more about, like, it's interesting that it says forget yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand. It doesn't just say lend a helping hand to other people. It shows me that God knows that we're going to have those faults and those flaws, and we're going to lean towards our own preservation and our own, success.
Yeah.
And he gives us the tools to go, hey, you're actually going to have to intentionally not do that and not live like that and think about other people.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because there's something about, I think you can tell the difference between someone who's helping for the sake of helping and someone who's helping for your sake.
Yes.
Yeah. You know how some people, they'll help you, but they're really doing it to fish for compliments, or they're doing it for recognition, or they're doing it because it makes them feel fulfilled in some way. Yeah. It's still helping, but the intention is different, and I think we can really sense that as people who receive that.
For sure.
My story around this one today, going back to my uni days, let me paint the picture, Ash. So at Auckland University, there's 2 courses that get you into medicine.
Right.
Pretty sure it's still the same at the moment. There's health sciences and biomedical sciences. Right. One is more core science based. One is more population demographics, sort of health in general. So there's about 600 to 800 students in each cohort. Whoa. And in the first year alone, everyone gets the opportunity to be invited to do an interview. And the only way you can get invited to do an interview is if basically you have like an A average across all your papers.
Right.
The stats work out to be 1 in 10 get invited to do an interview.
Right.
And of the 1 in 10, maybe like 1 in 5 will be invited to do medical training. And if you don't get in, you've got to finish that degree and apply as a postgrad. Yeah. So it's huge to get in that first year. And so I did my first year of biomedical sciences, and people had told me, oh yeah, this is a really competitive course. Like, people will try to sabotage what you do. And I just thought these are all stories. Right. Until it happened to me.
Oh, wow.
So one of the assignments, I even remember, it's MedSci 142. That was the name of the paper. And part of the paper was to do a rat dissection.
Right.
And so I go in there, and someone said to me, I don't even remember who, but I remember someone saying to me, oh, just pick the fattest rat you see. Just pick the fattest rat, and the organs will be bigger, and it'll be easier for you to identify them, and then you can move through the lab quicker.
Right.
And so I go in there, and there's this chonkers right there. I'm really sorry if this is switching some people off. I'm sorry, but I just bear with me. I hated the lab, if that makes sense. That's one of the reasons why I didn't continue down that path. So yeah, I just had to get through that particular year, which was very traumatic. This was one of the traumatic moments. So I picked the largest one, thinking I could just get in and out, identify what I needed to identify, and move on. Right. What I didn't realize, and now it makes sense, is obviously the larger a rat is, or anything is, the more fat tissue there is, and it's very hard to cut through those layers. Right. And so I was struggling, like the actual tools I was given, they weren't working. And so while all the other students are like doing what they need to do, I just can't even make that first incision to get in. Whoa. And so, call the tutor tried to do. But at that point, I was like, I'm not actually going to get through this. So that was one example. I had another example as well. I did a lab with a lab partner.
Yeah.
And so I did all the practical stuff and they were writing down all the answers. And so we got to the end and they had written out all the answers for the work we did together, in which I did most of the practical work. And so 10 minutes into the end of the class, this person's not helping me clean up all the mess because that's part of your coursework. You have to clean up your mess. You get graded for that too. I'm cleaning it up. They're writing it all down. And I said, can you help me with this? And they said, they said, I'll focus on writing this. You do that. And I thought to myself in that moment, oh, okay, well, I guess I can just copy them later. So with 5 minutes to go, I'm frantically packing everything up. And then I look up and I see this person leaving. And I just run after them and I said, we're a duo here. You're walking away with all the answers. And then they just kind of shrugged and they said, well, you did all the work. You should be fine to write down the answers. And I'm talking like numbers and micromillimeter units sort of thing. Like it was insane. So and I've actually talked about this previously on my very traumatic experience of that year.
Is a lot.
There was a lot. And I, for the first time, experienced what it is like to have people who are so obsessed with their own advantage that they sink to the level of sabotaging others. Now, the interesting thing is neither of those two got into med school.
Wow.
Neither of them did. Because as hard as they tried to pull everyone down, they were seen right through. They must have been in the interview process. Yeah. And the people who got through were the ones who helped me. They were the people who said, oh, you can copy my lab results. They were the good ones who didn't seek to, they lived out the second part of the verse. They forgot themselves long enough to lend a helping hand. Yeah. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think you really win in the long run when you try to drag people down. I never see those people flourishing for much longer. Yeah. Because life has a way of reminding those who sabotage others that it will come back to you. And life also has a way, and God has a way, I believe, of blessing those who help others. And so I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you've been sabotaged and someone has actively trying to, been dragging you down, live out the second half of the verse. Forget yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand. Don't sink into that victim mentality. Don't sink into the fact that I'm never going to flourish. This person's always going to have it over me. No, you stand in who you are and who God's created you to be. And despite how they are behaving, you rise up. Yeah. Now, for those of you who might feel a bit obsessed with wanting to gain the advantage, and do you know what? I think this often comes because the people who kind of don't help others are they themselves ones who were put through that themselves. Yeah. You find that with a lot of corporate, unfortunately, women in high roles, they won't help the younger women through because they were like, well, I had to work through all the tough stuff and that's what's made me who I am. Yeah. And you need to go through that same thing. Yeah. And so there's no helping hand sort of thing. I know I'm generalizing there. So I think if that's you, I really want to encourage you again to not be obsessed with getting your own advantage, because there's no such thing as our own advantage. Yeah. We are all part of something much bigger. Yeah. And there's only one advantage. There's only one thing. There's only one calling we all have together. And we touched on this a bit earlier. And that is to follow a life after Jesus. Yeah. And to do what he has called us to do. Yeah. Which is to spread the love of God so that everyone knows that there is a hope. And so if your way and your advantage doesn't line up with that, you're the one missing out. And God's going to look after that person that that you might have overlooked and maybe aren't helping actively. So I'll jump off my soapbox now, but I think I mean that's something that's I think really been on my heart. It was a really difficult experience for me, but I just saw God's faithfulness. At the end of the day, God elevated those who had a good heart.
Yeah, so true. That's so incredible, Joy. I love hearing your heart, and I think, when you look at it, you go, God, like, as long as we're putting you at the center, as long as we're forgetting ourselves, serving others, he does work it out, and it's so encouraging.
Well, we have come to the end of today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. Before we wrap up, I want to encourage you to take some time today to journal and reflect on the contents of today's episode. Because here's the thing, sometimes things can go through one ear and they come out the other because life is busy and it's crazy. And that's okay. You know what? The incredible thing about podcasts and all those sorts of things is that you can listen to them on the go. They're meant to be a companion. But every now and then there might be an episode that just sticks. You can just feel that this is something that was meant for you. And if today's episode has been something like that, why don't you just take out 5 minutes of time today to pray, to ask God maybe why this is something that sparked so much of a response within you, and to commit it to Him, to invite Him into it, and to ask Him to use this episode and use the contents of it to change and transform your life. And look, if you do feel like this has changed your life in some way, we'd love to hear about it. At the end of the day, we originate from a not-for-profit community radio station based here in Melbourne. This podcast would not happen without the support of so many incredible listeners. And we love hearing stories of how God is using the power of stories and the power of radio and communication to reach and change lives. So if you've got a story to tell, do reach out. The inbox is in the description below. everydayjoy@positivemedia.com.au. Look forward to catching up again next time.